If we follow the news closely, again, what happened in the nation of Niger is no longer just a domestic issue at this moment. Now take this, not only the nation of United States of America, but also the nations in Europe, for example, France, Germany, and also other nations around the world suspended their financial assistance to the nation. And given the fact that this nation, politically speaking, is completely in political chaos and also in the social instability. But meanwhile, how should we understand this economic relationship between Niger and also other countries? And also, what is the political link among Mali, Burkina Faso, and also Niger at this moment? Well, and also, how should we understand the statement recently made by the current president? Again, the president, even though he's detained at this moment, but meanwhile, he's still asking for all the help from all the possible leaders around the world, and to believe that in order to restore the normalcy and also the stability back to the nation of Niger, this is not just a domestic issue, but this is an international reminder when we talk about democracy today. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite back our distinguished speaker, who is Scott Morgan. Again, Scott Morgan has been the president of Red Eagle Enterprises since its inception in November 2012. And he uses his experience from serving at the U.S. military to address various projects. And currently, he's based in Washington, D.C. And again, if you follow our show, you should be familiar with Scott, because he's one of the active commentators and also expert on many nations in Africa. Well, Scott, and welcome back to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will, for having me.
Well, Scott, I want to get started. As we mentioned before, last time you and I had the discussion regarding the nation of Niger. Of course, on one hand, it's not strange news that for everyone, this nation is completely in political and social chaos. But meanwhile, I want to get started with the question is, why is this issue is no longer just a domestic topic, but also has become an international concern? As we mentioned before, countries such as France, Germany, and also other European countries suspended their international financial aid towards the country. Why is this important equally to other countries around the world?
That is a great question. And as some of our listeners may not have learned already, the United States has joined that list as well, suspending most food, most assistance, but we'll keep providing food and medicine to Niger. So that should actually be added to the list. Niger actually is one of the geostrategically important countries right now. As you know, as France wrapped up Operation Barkhane, its operation to support its counterterrorism program in West Africa, which was focused mainly in Mali and Burkina, which was actually forced to leave both of those countries. You know, they actually went into, they were actually invited to went into Niger to set up base operations, where the United States also has a base which houses both special forces and UAVs. So when it comes to the Western counterterrorism strategy, Niger was a hinge point in the region where it could actually continue operations in the region, but also indirectly could also be supporting events in Nigeria as well as potential. And also for the Lake Chad Basin Initiative, and which that will also take a hit, because although it has not been widely publicized by most media outlets due to the other events focused around Niger, Reuters reported Friday evening here in the U.S. time that Niger withdrew its contingent from the Combined Joint Task Force, which was dealing with both the Boko Haram and ICE weapons around Lake Chad. Niger has withdrawn from that. So already the Western and African counterterrorism strategies have taken a hit in a negative light. That will embolden the jihadists. And so now the next question the question is now, we see this event. We know Mali and Burkina Faso, which have had their own issues allegedly over security, but we're seeing the rise of actually strong leaders. And we're actually seeing kind of like a unified front, which is like their own version of the G5 alliance, which has two other members, Mauritania, which their reaction to the coup has not hit the internet at the 24-hour info news cycle, and Chad, which has stated that although they're the best equipped military in the region, they're not going to intervene in Niger. As you know, as we're recording this, today is the deadline of ECOWAS. However, we have another deadline to go through, and that could actually be the focal point of how some are in the region, as we saw with the debate yesterday within Nigeria's Senate.
Scott, again, I know that you're the expert on ECOWAS. Now, let me explain something to our audience. Again, this is something that you are going to passionately help us with better understanding. First of all, ECOWAS, it's a simple abbreviation which stands for Economic Community of West African State. Now, Scott, when we talk about the instability and also the political turmoil in the nation of Niger, why do we need to bring ECOWAS into our conversation? So what is the correlation between ECOWAS and also what's happening in Niger today? And also second, the role of ECOWAS played in understanding and also in hopefully in supporting the citizens in Niger so that they no longer suffer this political suppression or this social instability. Again, you're the expert. Walk us through step by step. What is the important and also the how significant it is for ECOWAS to make the voice when we look at the nation of Niger?
Niger is a member of ECOWAS. It is also a member of the G5 alliance. As a regional body, in the past, there have been several instances where ECOWAS has had to intervene to strengthen democratic institutions. They went into Cote d'Ivoire in 2005, 2006. During that transition, when Laurent Gbagbo, with their row with Laurent Gbagbo, former President Laurent Gbagbo. And what is interesting is that the coup plotter, actually the current leader of Niger, served on that mission when he went into Cote d'Ivoire. And then also they went into 2017 and also removed former Gambian President Jammeh, who lost an election, and then which allowed current President Barrow to actually take office. So, although it's called the Economic Community of West African States, it does have a reputation for upholding democratic ideas. So that is being tested right now by this putsch because, as you know, with the coups that have taken place in Mali, in Burkina, and the reaction to those events have been more diplomatic. Suspension from ECOWAS, economic sanctions for both Mali and Burkina. Those have been counterproductive at best. So now, with the situation on the ground, because one of the actions that Nigeria has taken has been to cut off power to Niger. 70% of Niger's energy grid is electricity provided by Nigeria. Will that act be counterproductive itself? We don't know yet. It's only been a few days since the power was cut, so we do not know. And already that since the putsch happened in Niamey, there have been complaints about rising food prices. So the question now becomes, will not only will the junta stay in power, but there's also the question, well, it's not a question of if ECOWAS goes in, the more the question will probably be when. Because basic for the best part is ECOWAS has no good options to resolve this. Because if the junta in the MA stays in power and no action is taken, that weakens ECOWAS. ECOWAS is already divided. Mali and Burkina are suspended, and their leaders have actually stated that they will defend the coup plotters. So that is a threat. And even if the government, even if President Bazoum is restored to power, there will still be a cloud hanging over this thing, because it could because the law, if you apply the law of unintended consequences, things in Niger could get worse. And as you see, some people fear the violence could actually spill back into Nigeria.
Brother, I want to read a statement again made by the current president, and also want to get your interpretation on this. Now, again, we know that the soldiers detained the president and also of Niger, and the president was ousted unwillingly. But meanwhile, recently the president made a statement, and I want to get your reaction. And it says, and I quote, "In our hour of need, I call on the U.S. government and the entire international community to help us restore our constitutional order." Now, again, Scott, you're the expert. How should we understand the statement made by the president? What does that mean, that it's time for the U.S. and also for the international community to step into this political and social chaos in order to restore the constitutional order? And again, another following question just to ask you is, what does that mean, the constitutional order, if the government is being ruled and being manipulated by the military power or by this coup? What do you say to that?
Well, I would assume the way he's defining constitutional order is that President Bazoum did win an election at over 56% of the vote, and he can claim that he is still a legitimate president. That's the easy part of the question. The more difficult part of the question is that you have the Biden administration and several others. And I hate to go back. The withdrawal from Afghanistan has left a sour taste in a lot of strategists' mouth. The way, basically, the president of the United States said, I want out of Afghanistan. I want it done by this date. And it was done in a haphazard fashion. Some people may fear that we may actually go down the same route again by installing a president, reinstating President Bazoum in the office. It could actually entrench the position out to Johnny. Mali and Burkina have already indicated that they are going to support him, and that both juntas have actually stated that there will be a declaration of war. And then we have also not had reports of elements of Wagner flying into Niamey within the last 24 hours as we're recording. So this is a case where some people want to have the change, but don't want the confrontation that may actually be a catalyst to create the change. It may end up being short-sighted due to the fact that, the longer Tijani stays in power, he can actually solidify. Because, he's only been in power for roughly 2 weeks now. And if you look at one of the actions of the Nigerian military at first, he did not have the support of them, because there are actually rumblings that the heads of the army were not happy with his performance as well. So, that actually may have had a role in this. But that being said, Nigeria is a red hot flashpoint. It presents a lot of danger with no easy solutions, and it's a position where, although going in and restoring the president by a military force is the least preferred option, it may actually end up in the long run being the best option, considering how events in both Mali and Burkina have played out.
Scott, we've been talking about Mali and Burkina Faso for a while. Now, let's put the three nations together. When we look at Mali, Burkina Faso, and also Niger, and we know that three of the nations have been battling insurgency by Islamist extremist groups that former colonizer France, along with the United States, have tried and failed to eradicate. And meanwhile, poverty and high cost of living also plague the West African states. Let's talk about those two things. And number one, how should we understand the presence of those what we called Islamic extremists among the nations of Burkina Faso, Niger, and also Mali? I mean, again, how devastating the situation is. Because again, when we look at anything related to Islamic extremists, people are very concerned. Of course, no country would like to receive the wording from any terrorism related to act or receive anything that can blow up the nation or blow up the city in an instant. But right now, at this moment, if we don't see any manipulation or minimize the threat of this insurgency, I think that could easily spill over into other countries. So again, Scott, you're the expert. Walk us through how concerning is the insurgency of Islamic extremists. What do you say to that?
Well, when it comes to not just Islamic insurgencies, but any insurgency as well, any insurgency that takes place is almost always the result of either a governance issue within the country or a neighboring country has internal problems where then the forces seek a base or a safe haven to conduct operations. As you know, Mali has had 3 coups since 2012. Burkina Faso has had a coup. I know we had the events here in Niger. People generally don't forget. President Bazoum, when he assumed office in Niger, that was the first peaceful transfer of power in that country's history. And that country gained independence in 1961. That was his ascension, was the first peaceful transfer of power. So in some instances, coups are the preferred option to change government. But often when they have changes like this, they don't often address the rampant issues of poverty and food insecurity. And which, if you look, and there have been several data places that analyze the ferocity and how often terrorism incidents occur. The situation in Niger was actually improving before this coup from a security standpoint. And so basically, even though General Tchani has stated that that the security in the country was getting worse and the numbers are showing it wasn't, this was probably more in the line of in the case of his personal, he thought he saw himself as a person who was a strong person who thought he was more important than the president. Even though there were certain members of the military and the elites in Niger that did not like him because he was ethnically Arab, which is a minority in the country, and they rankled at that as well. So that is also another factor that played into this as well. But as you know, you look at some of the moves that the junta's already made. Suspending the French uranium contracts. Making sure that no gold is exported to France, etc. Yada yada yada. Everybody wants to look. It's like, oh, it's poverty, it's internal, some people actually say, yeah, this is it. And this could also be an anti-French move. But as the day progresses and we get more and more news about how the events are playing out, but one thing is also for certain about the concern about the spreading. We have to look at what's going on in northern Nigeria as well, due to the closeness and the cross-border trade. That will be one of the first places that we'll actually see any blowback from an ECOWAS intervention. And one of the issues already inside Nigeria that has been taking place is the banditry. Some bandit groups have actually gone across the border. They have actually, when they've conducted their kidnappings and other raids, they have gone back across the border into Niger. And that was what, and that is a concern that some people have, whether or not the raids will intensify and target more issues in northwestern Nigeria, because people a lot of analysts have it right when they say Nigeria has a lot to lose in any potential intervention. But one of the most ironic things I have seen is that members of the Senate have requested President Tinubu to address the banditry issues in northwest Nigeria. But if he does nothing in Niger, he's not addressing the issues of banditry.
Brother, I want to wrap up our conversation. Again, I'm very glad that you touched on the nation of Russia. Last time when you and we had the conversation, we saw that some of the younger generations, they waved the Russian flags on the scene and when the nation is facing this chaos. Now, meanwhile, I want to still end this conversation by asking you the simple question is, what role does Russia play at this moment? Is it time for Vladimir Putin to step in, or perhaps sending the military to help with the chaos in Niger? Or maybe it's time for Russia to continue to mind his own business instead of creating more enemies, and why not just stay in peace? What do you say to that?
Well, actually, when it comes to the push in Niger, Russia sent them this message. Foreign minister, the Kremlin sent a message stated that they supported the restoration. But however, Prigozhin shared a video stating that he was looking forward to doing business in Niger. Members of the Nigerian junta flew to Bamako and actually arranged for Wagner to go in and do business, to conduct training. And the Wagner forces have arrived within the last 24 hours as we are recording this. And actually, I am in the line of most other analysts that when they view all the Russian flags flying in the protests and everything, which did not initially happen after the putsch, which I would take that as, it's the enlightened people in Niger having an anti-French bias, because amongst the better educated and everyone, everything that's wrong in their country is the fault of Paris. To some extent, that is true. But we're also finding out that in these countries, a lot of these wounds are self-inflicted by poor policies, reliance on strongmen, which we're actually seeing the return of. And if you look, but when we go to Burkina Faso at the recent Russian-Africa summit, Burkina actually sent a levy of military officers to go to Russia to attend school. So we shall see how that will actually play out. And as for countries in the region that are under threat, we are starting to see a rise in jihadist activities in both Benin and Togo. And so as the Islamists move south, and also we're seeing anti-French sentiment in the Sahel and stuff. It's a dangerous recipe. And now you also have countries such as Senegal and Ghana and Nigeria and even Liberia, which has upcoming presidential elections. They are in a dangerous position through no fault of their own, due to the fact that even though France was France left Mali, last year, and we're starting it, and we're seeing dominoes.
Well, I mean, again, brother, at this moment, we still don't know what is going to happen to the nation of Niger. Again, despite more countries suspended their financial aid and also support to the country. But meanwhile, we still don't see the legitimacy and also the stability of Niger. Again, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to speak to Scott Morgan. Again, Scott Morgan has been the president of Red Eagle Enterprises since its inception in November 2012, and he's located in Washington, D.C., and he's the expert on our show, help us with better understanding among the countries in Africa, politically speaking, and also from this economic standpoint. Well, Scott, again, thank you so much for your time to join our show on this beautiful Sunday. Really appreciate it. And again, continue to give us more insights and feedback as we continue to pay attention to what's happening in Niger and also in Mali and Burkina Faso. And we'd love to have you back on the show for our future episodes. So, brother, thank you so much for doing this.